Well, the second scrimmage of Training Camp 2.0 in the books for the Calgary Flames, Team Red and Team White, and this time the decision goes to Team White. They did the same sort of setup in terms of the actual three periods, the first two 5-on-5, and then the third period, a lot of special teams. But another thing that was similar is the schedule in terms of what we're seeing right now. The first game was an 8:30 start. Today we back into the noon hour, a 12:30 start, which ironically enough, mimics the start to the qualifying round as well. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's incredibly smart planning on the team's part. I think they'll look towards a 4:30 or 4:45 start later in the week for another inter-squad game. You want to give your players absolutely every item to go through and think about in preparation for the start of that qualifying round series against Winnipeg. Makes a lot of sense. The only difference is they just have completed a mountain skate. Now you're playing these scrimmages with three lines, trying to get back in shape. You could see that it is physically testing the group today.
Yeah, they're putting in the work, to be sure. All right, let's talk about what we saw here tonight, and maybe I should say today, and let's recap as far as the offense. And we said it at the end of the last scrimmage. We'll talk a little bit more in terms of the specifics through the first 40 minutes because that was the 5-on-5 play. But let's go back and go through the goals and a little bit of what we saw in terms of both sides here this afternoon. And we'll begin with Team White having an excellent first period, and it started off with Zach Ronaldo.
Yeah, and it started off early. Ronaldo really hoping to be a part of that August 1st opening night roster, goes to the net, gets inside position, a couple of whacks. He's a player who can provide great energy and physicality. I liked him today, especially early in the game. A little bit later, here's Lindholm, Monahan, and how about the youngster, Connor Mackey? Terrific pass through the seam. He's not going to be a part of this program, but the former college star figures in prominently, and so does Elias Lindholm. We're going to talk about him and his importance and his situation in a second or two. Then it's Augustusson to Austin Czarnik. He's desperately trying to put himself in the plans of Jeff Ward and the hockey team to be a part of opening day. And as far as some of the other equations being looked at, the goaltending, Cam Talbot was great in this game. In particular, this was a goal that belonged to Byron Froese. And, Froese is an easy guy to cheer for, just trials, tribulations, and where he's been. There's Talbot. Makes a penalty shot save off Oliver Shillington, and hard to argue with his first couple of periods and a little chirp at the end.
Of course, and I go along with a smile, and that's part of the fun we've seen in the scrimmage. Craig Conroy took a lot of heat in this scrimmage today as well for some questionable penalty calls. At one point, it even seemed like both teams were yelling at him, but either way, a lot of fun in terms of that. Now, let's talk a little bit about a man that you mentioned in that highlight pack, Elias Lindholm. In the first scrimmage, we talked a lot about that Bennett, Lucic, and Dubé line, and then also Andrew Mangiapane throughout those games, two guys that stood up. But over the course of these two scrimmages, has anybody been more impressive in terms of the overall work than a guy like Elias Lindholm?
Well, let's start with the fact Elias Lindholm did leave today, so we'll keep an eye on that. But for me, and I've said this a lot on the radio, he may not be their most dynamic player or their best forward, but I think he's their most important forward because he does everything. Part of the top line, if you will, with Monahan and Gaudreau, kills penalties, takes strong side faceoffs, big part of the power play. And today, his intelligence, his ability to make himself available, let's face it, he does a lot of heavy lifting for that line. We saw his goal today. This is a flashback to the goal he scored on Sunday night. Here he is winning a draw in a power play sequence. And the other thing that I've really liked is Johnny Gaudreau. So important with Monahan. I've thought that Gaudreau has had great jump, but as far as Lindholm is concerned, 29 goals. I think this is the type of player that you build around. To me, I've always likened him a little bit to Patrice Bergeron. I kind of think of him a little bit as Patrice Bergeron light. Incredible intelligence. When you watch him very closely, he just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And at a time where mistakes are magnified in the playoffs, the more guys you have that make fewer mistakes in key situations, the better chances you have to win.
Well, and obviously a huge part of that power play, and I want to ask you a little bit about that because when you spend 2 full periods dedicated to special teams, both 5-on-4, 5-on-3 situations, even a little 6-on-5 scenarios, it speaks to how important special teams will be when the lights turn on for real in the qualifying round and playoffs onward. Reps. Ray Edwards talked about the reps. You need the reps. How important are they through the course of these 2 scrimmages?
If they are already of the utmost importance along with goaltending, referring to special teams, don't you think, Brendan, that even goes up a notch or 2 in a best-of-5 series?
Sure. Yep.
I mean, it is so important. And we just touched a little bit on some of this team's top offensive players. The other thing about those reps is when you watch a game unfold, when your best players are feeling good about themselves, a lot of it can start with power play touches. It's not necessarily always whether you score goals. That's a big part. But good touches, good puck movement, feeling good about your game offensively, I find you can use power plays to then translate over into how you feel and how you perform in 5-on-5 situations. So, it's always very much talked about the actual whether you score or whether you don't.
Yeah, the numbers.
The numbers. But Brendan, to me, it goes way deeper than that in terms of involving and getting your best people feeling really good about their game. So many nights, it will really translate over to the rest of their game.
Just quickly, because that we saw obviously the number 1 power play unit, which was what we saw at the end of the regular season before the pause took effect. But the second unit that we've been seeing working on the other side of things has been a little bit different. And you had Michael Backlund, Milan Lucic, Andrew Mangiapane, but then Dylan Dubé and Mark Giordano. So a little bit different personnel, but some excitement. And we saw some promise there in terms of what their workload looked like here tonight.
Well, they've done some really good things in the scrimmages, in the specialty team scenario. And I think the 2 key guys that we haven't seen a lot of in their NHL career on the power play are Mangiapane and Dylan Dubé. Dubé, to me, just looks like he's at a different level in what I've seen the last 3 days, the way he shoots it. He gives you an option off the flank. You'll see him on the far side, can really shoot it. Here he makes a terrific interior look for a Milan Lucic goal on Sunday. And with Mangiapane, here's an underrated part of power play success: your ability to retrieve and get the puck back in zone. And Mangiapane will do that as well as almost anyone on this hockey team.
Well said, and we'll look forward to one final opportunity to see some scrimmage-like situations before it is a battle against another team, which I'm sure the players will be looking forward to as well in that first and only exhibition game up in Edmonton. This has been a lot of fun, and once again, I guess it'll be the tiebreaker on Thursday potentially, as we've got a win for red and a win for white.
Woohoo. Yeah, we'll see you Thursday.
All right.